Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting back into order on Tuesday, October 22nd. And please stand for the national anthem. Okay, any disclosure of pecuniary interest, general nature thereof? Okay, seeing none, I'll read the land acknowledgement statement. We would like to begin this meeting by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee peoples, acknowledging the One Bowl and Spoon Treaty. And we've had our closed meeting, so we'll have a rise and report on that, please.
Council met in closed session at 6 p.m. and provided direction to our township solicitor regarding an agreement negotiation matter. Discussions ended earlier than anticipated, and council accordingly resumed an open session to make a motion to go back into closed session to discuss matters listed under section 15 of the agenda. Council provided direction to staff regarding a matter pertaining to negotiations for the sale of municipal property. Council received information regarding an identifiable individual and adopted previous closed meeting of council minutes.
Okay, moving on to Mayor's remarks. Please note that meeting proceedings are being broadcast live, recorded, and made available throughout the township website and youtube.com. Tomorrow is the submission deadline for our Mayor for a Day contest, which is open to all Wainfleet students in grade 6 through 8. Information is available on our website, so you have just until tomorrow to do that. Police Services Board will be meeting on Thursday, October 24th, and this meeting is being hosted by the town of Pelham and is open to the public. And I'll be attending the Niagara Economic Summit hosted by the Greater Niagara Chamber of Commerce on Friday, November 1st. And we hope you're all able to join us for our 6th annual Remembrance Day ceremony on Monday, November the 11th. It'll be held at 10:45 at the Cenotaph. And our next regular meeting of council will be held on Tuesday, November 12th. And that meeting will be opened by our Mayor for a Day student. So we're looking forward to that. So. Okay, I look to councillors for any councillor remarks. No councillor remarks, okay. And then we move on to the adoption of the previous council minutes. Is there any discussion? Okay, seeing none. No objections or anything with those. Okay, those minutes are adopted. And now we will go into our delegations. And I look for Janet Handy, please, Executive Director of Kristen French Child Advocacy Center, regarding new programming at the Kristen French Child Advocacy Center, Niagara. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council, for giving us time to bring you up to date on 10 years of work at the center. I also have with me is one of our board members, Andrea Jack, who was instrumental in starting a particular program that I'll mention in a minute. So, the Christian French Child Advocacy Center provides a safe place for children to disclose their abuse experiences to joint police and facts investigation teams in a child-friendly and welcoming center. We were the first fully operational CAC in Ontario since 2008. Our model represents an international model of excellence in joint investigation for children and youth who have experienced abuse, and the model has been endorsed as the model of choice for interviewing children by the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police. Our purpose is to respond to the needs of young victims and their families by providing a non-threatening, child-friendly place where children and youth feel safe, disclosing their abuse experience, minimize the number of times children must repeat their experience, and significantly reduce the trauma associated with disclosing abuse. And we believe if we fulfill that purpose, that we can change the course of a child's life. Before a child advocacy center, a child may have to repeat that experience up to 7 times with various professionals in various settings, and that would only re-traumatize children. So working together as a team, the police gather evidence and determine criminal charges. FACTS determines child protection needs and assigns special support staff to families during and after investigation. Family Counseling Center, our third partner, provides follow-up counseling support, and we actually raise funds so that they can immediately respond to children with mental health support. And partners may call in medical personnel to assess children if needed. We host investigations, we greet families, direct incoming calls, and work tirelessly to bring awareness to the impacts of child abuse, sustain the center in the Niagara region, and collaborate with other agencies to provide healing programs and services. Our coordination ensures that the developmental needs of children and youth are considered first when they are encountering the justice systems meant to support them and not increase trauma. Several larger CACs in the country have had enough cases now to provide qualitative and quantitative research on the return on investment of investigations held at a child advocacy center. And some of what they found are significant benefits for children and families. Children report feeling less scared. Caregivers are more satisfied with the procedure and investigation, and you can imagine a caregiver is quite distressed at this time, so we need to reach out to the whole family, and that's one of the things that's so important for caregivers to feel as if their children are in good hands. Child advocacy centers refer more children for both mental health services and preventative and injury-related medical exams. And the benefits don't stop there. For the professionals and community, when they work in teams, they understand each other's role better. They do case review, which means that fewer children fall through the cracks, and their processes are reviewed at all times. Finally, there's an estimated savings of 32% if a CAC coordinates an investigation, so it's more cost-effective than non-CAC run investigations. Since opening at the center, we host one investigation per business day on average. In 2018, we had 310 cases involving 569 children, youth, and their families who have found a safe place to disclose abuse. We have grown from hosting 50 investigations to an average of 340 interviews per year. Children have come from every municipality in the Niagara region for investigation support. In other words, there's not a municipality whose children and youth do not experience child abuse and its impacts. Why is it so important to respond immediately to this model, besides the obvious immediate needs of children and youth? Because underreporting and untreated child abuse can affect a person for a lifetime. We now know that a child who suffers abuse is 30% less likely to graduate from high school. A youth who suffers abuse is 26 times more likely to be homeless, and an adult survivor of child abuse is 2 times as likely to be arrested. Our strategic plan calls for collaborative fundraising and programming whenever possible beyond the investigation itself. We collaborate with a number of other agencies to achieve outreach to youth, interagency and community learning opportunities, and in joint strategies for awareness, prevention, and work together to provide viable responses to the crime of child abuse in our Niagara communities. A Trillium grant has given us the opportunity to reach out to 12 to 15-year-olds through several avenues. I'll mention two tonight: Teen Connect, which is an awareness education presentation in our schools that was developed together with our partners, and Teen Creative, which is a 12-week program with Foster Festival of visiting artists to work with youth on self-expression and healing beyond their abuse experience. We work closely with agencies to present learning opportunities for professionals and the public, such as de-escalation training and victim resilience. And we began a collaborative website called PCAN, and Andrea can answer any questions about PCAN that you may have. Partners to End Child Abuse in Niagara. That's made up of over 14 partner agencies providing program, speaker, and service access information to professionals, caregiver, and the general public on one website. Having mentioned the programs, we also have Youth Advisory Council, which gives young people the voice in the center to teach older people like me how to be effective in communication with them. And we've started a second creative arts group called Kathy's Kids for ages 9 to 11. We have no core funding from government. Our funding sources are based on the tireless fundraising by volunteers and staff and partner support. We receive funds from three sources: events, campaigns, and planned giving, partner support, grants, foundations, and service clubs. The center raises 40% of its budget through fundraising alone, with 5 events, campaigns for special projects, and planned giving program to sustain the future. The Niagara region continues to be very generous in its support of the center, and we could not exist without that support. Finally, what's most important to us, and we say this every time we speak, it takes all of us to be vigilant on behalf of our children and youth. And so if you know of abuse or suspect a child is being abused, please report it. You do not have to determine if it is abuse, you just need to make the call, and the professionals will make that determination. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Handy. Are there any questions from any of the councillors? Councillor Cridlin?
Through you, Mayor, and again, thank you very much for raising awareness. I think that's a key part of what you're doing today, and I know Wainfleet's going to benefit, so thank you very much.
Kids to come in and search one website and then try to find what they need in another. So we came together and we put all our resources on one hub. So it made the searching and the assistance quicker and more private. So I will send this around, and right now we're doing, if you see some painted rocks around, we're doing a little Be a Rock Star and End Child Abuse, and it's on social media. We have an Instagram account, Pecan Niagara, and also you can see pictures on hashtag Pecan Rockstars. So.
How do most of your referrals come? Are they through the police? Are they directly through the internet, website search?
Police and child welfare bring in cases. Because of the nature of the work they do, they need to be able to bring them here. We do not have walk-in referrals. So that may come more likely to come for counseling referrals from a number of sources. But the investigation itself is headed by police and child welfare.
Okay. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much, Ms. Handy.
Thank you for your time.
Excellent presentation. I look to receive that mover to receive it, please. Councillor Gilmore, seconder. Councillor McClellan, all in favor of receiving that report, and that is received. Thank you. Okay, our next delegation is Mr. Dominic Ventresca, Chair of the Age-Friendly Niagara Network, and it's regarding an update on Age-Friendly Niagara Network opportunities for the Township in 2019. Mr. Ventresca, thank you and welcome.
Thank you for the warm welcome, and Mr. Mayor and members of council and staff. We thank you for the opportunity to come and share with you some of the work that's happening across Niagara related to age-friendly events. I think it's pretty timely, and we're fortunate that we're at this agenda, given that you've got a report, I know, going forward this evening. So what I'd like to do is kind of give you a global perspective first, and then zero it down into Niagara region, then really focus into fine-tuning it here for Wainfleet. So hopefully this will work for me here. Okay, so I'd like to tell you a little bit about the network, who I represent and who we are. And I have Doug Rappeljay here, and he's a long-time serving member as a volunteer on the Leadership Council for Niagara, and he'll have a few comments at the end to say as well. And I'd like to go over some demographics, because that's very significant to understanding what age-friendly is about and why people should be concerned about making their community an age-friendly community. I'd like to go over the main messages that we have around helping people understand, raising awareness, and why people should act on this subject, and then zero right in on perhaps things that your council may want to consider for moving forward.
Okay, I'll just remind you, sir, about 10 minutes is what we try to keep our presentations to, so thank you.
Keep an eye on the clock behind you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So starting globally, the World Health Organization, this is where it all started, where they identified worldwide the need to address the unprecedented phenomenon of so many older people living longer and so on. And the various components in that floral thing show that housing and respect and transportation and so on are some of the ingredients. And you'll see that this is not just for about older people, it's for all people. Looking at Niagara, the population being around 450,000, and the population of people over 65 is about 21.5%, and that contrasts to the rest of Ontario at 16.7 and Canada at 16.9. So Niagara is ahead of the curve in terms of the number of older people we have here. And when you look at the various local area municipalities, all of them, including Wainfleet, are above the provincial average in terms of the number of people or the percentage of people that are 65 plus. So who we are volunteers, first of all. We've been funded by the Ontario Trillium Foundation for the past 10 years, but and we have 450 people in the community that have subscribed to our newsletter and are keen on learning about age-friendly and participating in some way. And the members, both on Leadership Council and on the broader membership, represent government, not-for-profits, and business. The council itself, the volunteers who meet roughly every month, represent numerous municipalities across Niagara, and also we have Brock University and Niagara College represented among other community agencies, not-for-profit community agencies, and some private sector representatives as well, because it's good for business as well to be aware of the needs of older adults. The vision that was put together, again, we always go out to the community to ask for input. So when we first started, we had a whole bunch of people come together, and what they came up with was a community for all ages, which is not, again, just about older people, because typically what's good for older people is good for all ages. And there's so many examples of that. But we're looking at, as people age, creating a caring community, and one that optimizes overall well-being. Some of the things we've done, we've raised awareness about the World Health Organization principles. We've encouraged local citizens to take action. We don't direct people to do things. We raise awareness, and hopefully people locally will pick it up, get it, and then move on as they want to, because every community is different, Township of Wainfleet being unique, other communities as well. We got about 500 people or so formally involved in a process a few years ago, which came up with an action strategy and action, or at least an aging strategy and action plan. And we've presented it to local area municipal councils. In fact, this is my second appearance here. I was here before in the previous council, just to kind of bring that aging strategy to your attention. And now I'm here to develop, or to give you sort of more current developments. And this is one of the key messages that we want to raise awareness about. Today's older adults are different than yesterday's seniors. And we often have ideas of preconceived notions of what seniors are about. Well, today's older adults are more than ever. First of all, it's an unprecedented phenomenon in the history of mankind to have this many older people living this long, being well, active, healthier, contributing to the community. Look at your volunteers across the board. I'm sure there's a good number of them that are, older adults. They provide valued support to their families. They're significant consumers in the local economy, and I'll have a few slides to demonstrate that. And they also donate disproportionately higher to the worthy causes in communities. So older adults are an economic driver. That's not the stereotypical view of older adults. You know, they're often viewed as dependent and a drain on the economy and so on. But the reality is that younger generations no longer represent the biggest growth market. Baby boomers are numerically superior. They control the bulk of wealth and spending. And boomer households, those aged 50 to 69, spend 66% more on goods and services than millennial households. There's some few reports that Regional Council has commissioned, and one of them says population growth can drive employment growth if the population growth itself is due to commuters and retirees moving to Niagara, and there's lots of evidence of that. And if one could harness the benefits of this aging population as they bring and they spend their pensions and their savings, they generate population-serving jobs and in-migration of younger people. It's important for municipalities to attract younger people and families by having older people here spending their money creating businesses. That helps to bring that other goal as well. So they're sort of a good symbiotic relationship. Another report at Niagara Regional Council showed that new homeowners in Niagara, over almost 50%, are in the 55 and over age category. So Niagara has a strong new home market that are geared to empty nesters and retirees. And these are reports that have presented by Regional Council or received by Regional Council. So what other municipalities have done to give you a little bit of perspective? They've established seniors advisory committees or age-friendly advisory committees. They've applied for provincial grants, which are available to municipalities. Some of them have joined the World Health Organization Global Network, and others have done age-friendly infrastructure improvements like wider sidewalks and curb cuts and benches and all the things that people, again, of all ages are going to benefit from. So what's next potentially for you, depending on the decisions you make, Mr. Mayor and Council? You could identify in the community a champion that might get involved and help move this age-friendly movement along. Your staff, some of you as elected officials may want to champion this. You may choose to establish an age-friendly advisory committee or a seniors advisory committee, as you choose to call it. You may join the World Health Organization Global Age-Friendly Network and be in tune with what people across the globe are doing. And you may include the creation of an age-friendly community as an underlying principle in your strategic planning and other work you do. So that's what I have to contribute, Mr. Mayor. I hope I've done within the time limit. And then Doug Rapinger just has a word to say because he is kind of the senior spokesperson involved for 10 years with the Welland Seniors Advisory Council. And so he has a lot of experience and he's prepared to share it and leave you with a package and be available for future consultations. Doug?
Okay, thank you.
And I'm a senior. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'll be very brief. Welland in 2008 were the first to appoint a senior advisory committee, and it's been a very active committee. And its purpose is to advise council on matters that relate to seniors in our community. And over the time that we have been there, I'll just briefly mention a few things. We advocated for hospice programs, and we're very successful. Presently are advocating for a hospice residence in Welland. In the area of education, we've sponsored forums on senior safety, senior poverty, elder abuse, mental health, that type of thing. We developed a flag that we raise for Senior Citizens Month in June, and on a National Senior Day, which was just last week, we raised a flag that we had designed to give recognition to those special events and to the contribution that seniors make in our communities. We have responded to many of the issues, the national dementia strategy. We responded to the increase in natural gas costs and the effects on seniors. We responded to the restructuring of the health system, just to give you some idea. We make recommendations to council on a regular basis on the age-friendly projects, larger street signs, benches and washrooms along the canal. And so because of time, That gives you some idea of the type of things that we do. We have a newsletter that goes out in the community for seniors. We also created one of the first in Canada creating a age-friendly business in Welland and Pelham. And just last Friday, the age-friendly business of the year was awarded a Ruby Award at the Chamber Ruby Awards in Welland. So I'm delighted to know that we now have age-friendly or advisory committees in all communities. And so, as Dominic said, we're very pleased that you're considering establishing one here. And if we can be of any assistance to you as you develop it, I put together a package of information for you, and we'd be very happy to help in any way that we can. So I don't know whether you have any questions or...
Thank you very much. Any questions to either of the gentlemen from councillors? And yes, we are, that is on our agenda this evening, so it is good timing, so yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, seeing no questions, thank you.
Appreciate your time.
I have a motion to receive this, please. Councillor Gilmore, seconder. Councillor McClellan, all in favor of receiving this, and that is carried. Thank you. Okay, we'll now ask for Mr. James Goodacre, Wainfleet resident, to come forward. Request for council to review options to reduce speeding on Lambert Road. Thank you, Mr. Goodacre. Push the button and you're all set.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening. My name is James Goodacre, and my family and I have lived on Lambert Road for the last 5 years. In that time, we've observed an increase in the number of vehicles speeding down Lambert, occasions of multiple vehicles racing, and 2 accidents where cars entered the ditch and struck driveway embankments. Okay, and you got the picture up there to see. Lambert Road runs east-west, and it's a popular road used by locals traveling to and from Welland. The road is a 3.75 kilometer straight run, terminating with S-bends at each end to allow for proper spacing at the CP rail line crossings. There are 4 side roads that intersect Lambert on the south side, Green, O'Reilly's, Deeks, and Tunnicliffe. However, the traffic on Lambert has no stop signs and has the right of way for the entire stretch. Like many other roads in Wainfleet, Lambert is crowned for drainage, has no shoulders, and is constrained on either side by deep drainage ditches, especially at the east end where it drains into the river. Previous cross-culvert replacements and dump truck traffic for new home builds over the years have left many areas of the pavement uneven. Under normal driving speeds, these road characteristics wouldn't be an issue. However, we regularly observe vehicles traveling in excess of 100 kilometers per hour down this road, and a few who, in my estimate, easily exceed 130. And that's even conservative. If I told you the real speed, you probably wouldn't believe me. Our neighbors have contacted the police several times over the years, including when active racing was happening on the road, and the police told them that they had to catch people in the act in order to do anything about it. A patrol car was supposed to be sent to park in their driveway to watch for speeders, but it never showed up. The only solution provided to this issue has been for us to request the township to post reduced speed limit signs, for example, 60 kilometers an hour along that road. Annoyed with the inaction from the police department, I stopped one speeder myself and lectured them on the dangers of speeding down this road and the fact that many families with children live along this stretch. I'm here tonight to ask the township to look at all feasible options and come up with a solution to the speeding issue on Lambert Road. Something as simple as the township asking the police to conduct patrols along this stretch at peak times could be a start, or installing speed limit signs as was mentioned earlier, or possibly installing stop signs at the intersections. As citizens, we've done what we can by calling the police and have come up empty-handed. Hopefully, with the help of the township, we can avoid a serious accident or fatality. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions? Discussion? Councillor Cridlin? Or Councillor McCullen, go ahead.
You, Mr. Mayor, I happen to live on one of those side streets, so I know what he's saying is true. The problem I see is it's a lack of speed enforcement all along. If you're going down Riverside Drive, they will run up your tailgate, and if it's posted at 80, if you're doing 90, there's still, you can see their windshield, you can't see the rest of the car. It's just an ongoing problem. Doesn't matter if it's Riverside Drive going into Wainfleet or Riverside Drive and going out, Lambert Road, all of them, they're all the same. And I mean, it's across Niagara, it's everywhere, it's the 406. People are in too big a hurry, and I don't know how we're going to get it stopped. You know, stop signs, half of them will probably run them because there'll never be a cop there. You can see them from a mile away, right? So I think we need to ask for more police enforcement in the area.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cridlin, you had a comment?
Thank you, through you, Mayor. And again, I think there's been other delegations before you, James, so thank you for continuing to bring this to the forefront. I think many other residents are also frustrated with the speeds on some of their roads. Different times, different roads, so I'll look to staff to maybe suggest something or what we do next, but thank you for the presentation.
Yeah, if they park in our driveway, they could write tickets all day long, I'm sure, especially at peak times, so.
Yes, and you're not the first person to stand at the podium and express that concern. We've had a few roads here where people have come in and it's an ongoing problem. There is an issue in the policing aspect of it. A police officer can come and sit there for half an hour to an hour, then they get called away to another call, and then, on it goes. So policing is part of the answer. And but we have been looking at this because it is a concern to us, and I think I'm going to ask the CAO to, because they've been looking at it, to give some comment.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Council. As has been mentioned, we have had a number of delegations over the last little while raising this issue across different roads throughout the township, and staff have, as our first line of defense, been in touch with and regularly contact the Niagara Regional Police to identify problem areas and request their assistance. So I can say that's something that we will be doing immediately after this meeting, and making sure that they are aware that council has been approached with the concerns regarding this area. On a more long-term basis, staff are also trying to identify options that can be applied more broadly throughout the municipality. And what we've been doing is looking at some of the best practices being undertaken by other municipalities, both in Niagara and across the province. One of the more effective things that we're hearing are temporary sort of, you're driving this speed signs that get posted. They have a little radar gun in them, and they flash your speed if you're going too fast, that sort of thing. It has been shown to be effective in other places, and we are currently looking at attempting to acquire or implement something along those lines here in Wainfleet. Unfortunately, with our resources available to us, we can't spin on a dime and get those in place right away. But now that we have the information from you, we'll add you to our list, and we will certainly be attempting to expedite that as quickly as we can. And then again, there are other traffic calming things that we can look at as well. And again, now that this has been brought to our attention, we'll see what would work for that style road, that location, that kind of road, and move from there. So thank you very much.
And just further comment on that, I sit on the police service board, and we have a meeting this Thursday, and there has been a number of residents come forward. And every time I do speak to the chief officer in charge of the Port Colborne detachment, which polices Wainfleet. So I think I can take this up a little bit further up the ladder here and express concern and see if we can't get a little bit more attention to it. So, okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
So I look for any other questions? No, I look for a motion to receive that, please. Councillor Gilmore, seconder Councillor Van Vliet, all in favor of receiving that report, and that is... Okay, moving on to admin staff reports. The administrative staff report 26-2019. I'll ask our clerk to speak to that, please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to all of council. The purpose of this report is to present the proposed regular meeting of council schedule for 2020. According to the Township's procedure bylaw, meetings are scheduled every third Tuesday, beginning with the first Tuesday in January, unless council by resolution directs otherwise. Staff will note that special budget meetings have been scheduled for March 4, 11, and 16.
Okay, is there any discussion on the scheduling? Everybody's had a chance to have a look at it. Okay, our recommendations is that this report be received and that the 2020 council meeting scheduled outlined in the report be confirmed and adopted. A mover for that, please. Councillor McClellan, seconder. Councillor Quidlin, all in favor? And that is carried. Okay, ASR 27-2019, admin staff report. I'll ask our clerk to speak to this one as well.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to all of council. Direction was provided to staff in December of 2018 to research and establish a terms of reference for a community engagement committee and a recreation committee. After receiving further input from members of council, staff is recommending that council establish a recreation and community events committee. The committee will provide an ongoing forum for community feedback and input and will make recommendations to council based on those results. A terms of reference has been completed and is attached to the report for council's consideration. If approved, a call for applications will commence immediately and will remain open for a period of at least 4 weeks to permit the community to review the terms of reference and submit their applications.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Quidlin.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I'm sort of looking at both of these at the same time because we have another report right after. And again, small thing, just like making it also an advisory committee, so we've named them differently. And then the other thing is to add some kind of measurement. So one has measurement, one doesn't. So maybe they report at least annually back to council with their terms of reference. Those would be my 2 suggestions. Thank you.
Thank you. We can add that in. Councillor Gilmore.
Thank you, Mayor. My only question would be, are you stuck on the meeting date and time? I see it's Wednesday at 1 o'clock to 3, which is good for some people, but would limit a lot of people. So I'm not sure whether that's flexible or if that should just read that depending on the makeup of the committee, meetings will be scheduled accordingly.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to all of council, that we can change that. The reason I had put it as a daytime meeting was to cut down costs of staff time. So that was the intention of that. But again, we're flexible if council wants to direct otherwise.
Well, yeah, I think you should take that out because I don't want to discourage anybody. Maybe it will work after the committee's composed, but it may disqualify a lot of residents who are generally working in that window. So my preference would be that the meeting schedule will be determined after the committee is composed. That would be the only change that I'd like to see.
Any other comments along that line? That makes a lot of sense to me. Once the committee is populated, then we can look at what works for everybody and go from there, so we can make that change. Councillor Quidlin.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just going to add that if I was applying for a job, then I don't know what the hours are that I'm going to be able to commit to. So I don't know if we've solved the problem of getting people. Then we get 10 applications and we find out it's going to be at a certain time, and then those people will have to decline. So I do want to be open, but I think if we are leaning into an evening, then if we know we're going to be leaning into evening hours, we might as well put that in our outreach. So do we have a flexibility of the day? Do we want to kind of narrow down the day in our application and our outreach? Or do we want to leave it completely open then and sort them that way?
Thank you. Clerk, do you have comments?
Through Mr. Mayor, to all of council. So in my research of the area municipalities, the majority of the meetings are scheduled during the day. And I just want to point out that if the meetings are scheduled at night, there is a cost for staff time included in that as well. So just wanted to note that.
I think either whichever way you go, you're going to open it for some people and close the door for other people. So I think probably a good idea to go with the proven method that the other communities are using right now. And perhaps it can be adjusted or changed as on the fly once we get the committee populated. Councillor McClellan?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I tend to agree with Councillor Gilmore that you're basically, sorry, Terry, you're basically limiting, if it's daytime meetings, you're limiting to retirees or seniors, and there's lots of people that want to be on these. I sat on this committee 7 or 8 years ago when it was in an evening so that you could get home from work and do it. I think you leave it open, you see who applies, and if they agree to have it in the daytime, you have it in the daytime. If they agree to have it at night, you see what your committee is made up of and who's there. It might be Thursday afternoon works better than Tuesday for everybody. It's, right?
Yeah, I'll tend to agree with that, that I think at this time to structure it too strictly would be, a wrong step to do. And I think first we should populate the committee and go from there. And look to the CAO for comment.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, one of the things we can do when we're asking for people to make application is identify preferred or available meeting times. And then depending upon what sort of response we get, that can help sort of direct the composition of the committee from there forward.
Okay, and Councillor Van Vliet.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm just wondering, how are we going to advertise this for people to give applications to us?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Van Vliet. So we will be advertising on the township's website and social media platforms.
I'm just wondering, because now that we all get the paper, could it maybe go in there? Thank you. For
Most
that.
definitely, we can include it in the paper.
Thank you.
And through you, Mr. Mayor, if we do get support for two committees this evening, we can do one ad for both.
Okay, are there any other questions or discussion on this? So, okay, so we'll make those changes. So the recommendation is that this report be received, that council establish an advisory committee working group that will operate as a link between the community and council to make recommendations regarding recreation services, facilities, programs, and community events within the Township of Wainfleet. That the council approve the terms of reference for the Recreation and Community Events Committee attached to this report is Appendix A, and that the deputy clerk commence the application process for the appointment of community members. Do we have a mover for that, please? Councillor Gilmore, seconder. Councillor McKellen, all in favor. And that motion is carried. Thank you. Okay, we now have the second committee, which is the establishment of a seniors advisory committee, and I'll look to the clerk to speak to that one as well, please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, all of council, so much the same as the last report. Direction was provided to staff in December of 2018 to research and establish the terms of reference for a seniors advisory committee. Currently, 11 of the 12 municipalities, local area municipalities, have in place or are establishing seniors/age-friendly advisory committees, many of which who have endorsed age-friendly principles which are listed in the Niagara Aging Strategy Action Plan. Through a community consultative process, the committee will produce an action-oriented strategy to create an age-friendly Wainfleet. Terms of reference has been completed and is attached to the report for council's consideration. If approved, a call for applications will commence immediately and will remain open for at least 4 weeks to permit the community to review the terms of reference and submit their applications. And so the changes made to the last terms of reference will be changed in these as well.
Okay, discussion? Questions? Councillor Cridlin?
Through you, Mayor, thank you. In light of what we have heard today in the delegation, I imagine all that work's going to go over to such a committee, probably, and then maybe we would adopt that seniors/age-friendly name in this committee as well, because it looks to be a big part of the work that they're going to undertake. So it's just a small suggestion.
Any other questions? Yeah, I have no issue with the name there. I kind of leaned in towards seniors advisory, but I understand the lingo today is age-friendly. And we are the only municipality that is not included in Niagara region, and it's all age-friendly, so we'll likely be making that change. So I guess I'm just too old. I go the old way. So a recommendation, if there's no further discussion, that do you want to officially change the name right now? Do we want to do that?
Thank you. I'll make the motion to change it to age-friendly then, and be consistent with the rest of the municipalities. I'll move that.
Okay, seconder. Councillor Gilmore, all in favor of that change? And that is carried. And so the recommendation is that the amended report be received, that council establish a seniors advisory committee working group to recommend and promote age-friendly initiatives in order for the Township of Wainfleet to become a more age-friendly community, and that council approve the terms of reference for the seniors advisory committee attached to this report as Appendix A, and that the deputy clerk commence the application process for the appointment of community members. A mover for that, please. Councillor Van Vliet, seconder. Councillor Cridland, and all in favor of that? And that is carried. Thank you. Okay, the building staff report. I don't think there's really anything there to speak to. And I know the clerk wishes to speak to an issue on this.
So, through you, Mr. Mayor, to all of council, direction was given by the previous council to receive monthly building and bylaw statistic reports. Staff is proposing that the statistical information be circulated monthly to council in their council information package rather than being placed on the agenda. The information will still be available to the public for access and review via the township's website, and council can at any time place the information on the agenda for discussion. If there is no objection from council, stat reports will be circulated monthly to council in the CIP, and biannually a more comprehensive report will be placed on the agenda for review.
Okay, any questions? And this came about as part of the, we look at the building report at every council meeting. Nothing is said, nothing is done on it, no comments are made. So in an effort to continue to streamline and become more efficient in our meetings, we thought that would be a great way to do that. So we'll only see those, still open to the public. Everybody will see what they need to see. So it's a great step forward in making our meetings just a little bit more cleaner, more efficient. So the recommendation on that is that report be received for information. I have a mover for that, please. Councillor McClellan, seconder. Councillor Cridland, all in favor, and that is carried. And moving to the bylaw enforcement staff report, I'll look to our bylaw officer to speak to that, please. Or our Lee speak to that. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Mr. Mayor, the purpose of this report is to respond to council requests as part of a bylaw enforcement policy review. In April of this year, council requested staff explore other options for bylaw response other than the straight reactive model that we've been using traditionally. While there's only one other municipality that does proactive enforcement, staff in the township, as a result of the council request, did in fact explore how such an approach might be used here in Wainfleet. It was found that by combining a reactive approach with proactive response, where safety of persons and property is involved, staff feel that health and safety would be increased in the township, as well as the integrity of property and the standards of the community. As well, as per council request in July, staff have provided the policy as well as standard operating guidelines, which will help increase positive interaction with residents, compliance, and increase officer safety.
Okay, thank you. Discussion. Councillor Cridland.
Through you, Mayor. Thank you. I'll start. First of all, thank you very much for the extra work. It was great to have the time to review, and the standing operating guidelines certainly help clarify what we're trying to look at for the enforcement policy. So thank you for all that. There was a small item. I'm going to start with a little editorial item just in the SOGs, it's just to do with who we're speaking to. So, it's not quite the decision that's in front of us yet, but on page 9 of the section 5.4.2, and again, this is just about getting, when we are enforcing, to have the right person. I would just delete or other persons present. That was the only item in the whole document that I thought would, keep us on a clear approach to the enforcement guidelines that you had. Otherwise, I had no issues with any of them. I think it was great.
I'm just looking to our CAO as to the process of how, do you have a number of other edits that you're looking for? Okay.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Again, I think from a staff perspective, there is no real issue with removing that. I will say that a lot of the procedures and guidelines that we've established here are intended for clarification and transparency and all that. But a lot of them are sourced from the underlying legislation, specifically the Municipal Act, which does provide various specific duties that an officer has to do when he attends a property, for example. So that really covers off a lot of the sort of rudimentary processes that are there as well. So elimination of it from the guidelines is fine, but ultimately the provincial law will trump it. And if any, and again, the way the law is written, if any person requests that an officer identify themselves, that officer must respond to that any person, whoever that person is. So that's point well taken, and we can certainly amend the guidelines, but the Municipal Act always supersedes.
Okay, is there any other discussion on this? Councillor Cridlin?
Through you, Mayor, I can go back to what we discussed now last time we saw this package, because I think the enforcement part of it hasn't changed much. So I just sort of reiterate that there's nothing really driving the change. Yes, there's a cost that we haven't planned for this cost, or haven't yet. It's like taking a half step sort of doesn't really make sense to me. It would sort of be one or the other. So I'm certainly leaning to option one at this point. Any residents that perhaps have reached out to me are certainly inclined to want us to stay status quo. Again, given that there hasn't really been a driver. So maybe a compromise as we revisit it in a year and see if there's a need to go to option two. But my preference would be to go with option one, and I'm looking forward to hearing from my other councillors.
Councillor Van Vliet.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I would agree with Councillor Cridlin. I have only heard that people don't want somebody watching them. They want to stay with status quo. I have heard nobody ask for this. So they're wondering where it's coming from. I appreciate the work. It's well done. But I would have to go with option one as well.
Okay, any other discussion? Just as a reminder to the public that this was not a full go for the bylaw officer to go looking for all sorts of issues anywhere. It was a safety issue sort of thing that was the main concern, giving the bylaw the ability to intercede if there was a property with a dangerous situation present. So that was I know as we met with staff, as I worked with staff on it, that was really the focus of it. But so is there any other comment or discussion? Councillor Gilmore.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess my only comment would be, I understand the health and safety issue around moving to the second model. I also understand that it's the right, obligation, and any resident can put themselves in model 2, and if they see something that's egregious, they can go back to our complaint-driven thing and say this needs to be addressed completely anonymously. So I think your comments regarding the fact that it's to enhance health and safety are totally legitimate. Also, totally legitimate for members of the community to take that role upon themselves. So I could support moving to the modified approach for a trial period. I can also be quite content with Model 1, bearing in mind that the residents have an obligation to report things that they see that are egregious, and then we're going to carry on with everything else that's in this report. So that's just a comment. I didn't really solve any problem.
Thank you, Councillor Gilmore. Any other comments or discussions? Councillor Cridlin?
Thank you, through you, Mayor. And building on that, I think the middle ground where it is an intention to make things safer, it's also opening up another realm of liability that I would want to know a lot more about before I, again, moved into more liability of not catching something that was discretionary. So I like the idea of citizens continuing to do what they've been doing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move into the recommendation, which is that this report be received and that the amended bylaw enforcement policy be adopted by council as outlined in this report. So give a mover for that.
I'll make a motion that we move to option 1, please, and hopefully get a seconder then.
Okay. Seconder, Councillor Van Vliet. All in favor of that? And that is carried. So that is defeated.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. With the adoption of the Model 1, which is basically the status quo model of responding to bylaw matters, we will make the necessary updates to the policy and the standard operating guidelines to ensure that there is no reference to the proactive enforcement. All bylaw enforcement in the township will now remain as it has been on a complaint-driven basis. And again, staff are more than happy with that direction from council, and we're more than prepared to work in that way. The one comment that I will make again, just with respect to public property, such as our parks or our cemeteries or our buildings and facilities, is that we will still enforce our bylaws on our lands, so that if we see things inappropriate on our lands, we will take steps to correct them without the need for somebody to complain about them to us, because we just want to maintain our property as a sort of good constituent of the municipality, if you will.
Okay, thank you. And I would like to thank staff for, I know a lot of work went into this report, and a few meetings that I attended, and we sat down and went through the process. So I appreciate staff's work and time put into this. And it was a good exercise of investigating a potential change in our bylaws, and it's worked out the way it's supposed to have worked out. So thank you very much to staff for all your work. Okay, and now come to 15-2019 and our review of clean yards bylaw, and I'll ask our bylaw officer to speak to that, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to all of council. This report was deferred from the July 9th council meeting. Council asked for staff to review this proposed bylaw again, as there were some items that council would have liked us to address. We have gone through this as staff and have made some changes to definitions and some other sections. So this proposed bylaw is now ready for council's questions and consideration.
Okay, thank you. Discussion? So, Councillor Cridlin?
Thank you, Mayor. Again, great report. Nice to have had the time to consider this. And again, going back, what was it, 1992? So that's kudos to all of us to be here. But so one thing on exemptions, again, first time around at this stuff, but what if there's a garbage strike? And I don't know, but can you just comment whether it's obvious that that's an exception? It doesn't have to be written. If you could just comment, thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Cridlin. Yes, if there is a major garbage strike, we will accommodate for that. Obviously, that's out of every resident's control. So there will be exceptions under that, and that doesn't have to be listed.
Okay, any other discussion? Councillor Cridlin?
Again, through you, Mayor, and again, to staff probably, when we talk about owners and persons, and the definitions are all there, can you just reassure me again how that works at the door? So I'm going to make it personal. The bylaw officer comes to the door. It's my nephew. He knows nothing about whatever's being transgressed or otherwise. Just reassure me what happens at the door, or maybe it's something like it's a renter, which would be different, but again, there's lots of renters in the summer. If you could just differentiate how this policy or bylaw will work in those situations. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Cridlin. So we'll use your first example with your nephew. If I attend the property and obviously I've done my research and I have an idea who the property is by the name before I attend the property. So if it's someone that's different than what I assume is going to be the person answering the door, I will obviously address myself, introduce myself, show my identification, and address why I am at the property, and ask for the registered owner. If I'm told that they're not there, I will tell them there is an issue. I'm just going to do a quick inspection, and I will leave my contact information. The inspection still needs to happen, but no discussion will be had with them regarding the inspection. But they will get, we call them door hangers. They obviously hang on your door. It will have all the information, the time I was there, why I was there, the violations that's there, my phone extension, my email extension, and it's for them to contact me so we can go further. And for the second scenario, for a renter, if they are the person that is in care and control of the property, again, I will address myself, tell them why I'm there, and I will ask them to come walk the property with me so we can go through what the bylaw says, what the potential violations might have been, and we can discuss corrective actions. If we can work out a situation right there that we can address it within a few days, I will just make arrangements to come back on a reinspection and get the matter dealt with. If it's not, then the owner will be notified. Informal notice will be sent to the owner and to the occupant of the property.
Okay, any other questions on that? Okay, seeing none, the recommendation is that this report be received and that the updated Clean Yards bylaw attached as Appendix B to this report be presented to Council for ratification at its meeting on November the 12th, 2019. Mover for that, Councillor Gilmore, seconder. Councillor Van Vliet, all in favor, and that is carried. Okay, and now we're moving to the regulating backyard hens, and I'll ask our planner, Sarah, to speak to that, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to all of Council. So Council had previously directed staff to prepare a report that looked at the possibility of permitting livestock, specifically chickens, within the township's hamlets. Under current policies, the raising of chickens is considered an agricultural use, and agricultural uses are not permitted within the residential, institutional, and commercial designations commonly found within our hamlets. So my report outlines 3 options. Option 1 is to permit backyard hens within the hamlets on residentially designated and zoned properties. Option 2 is to permit hens within all residential designation, and that includes not only the hamlets, but the lakeshore residential zone. And then option 3 is to maintain the status quo, meaning that the raising of chickens would continue to only be permitted in areas designated and zoned rural and agricultural. I've recommended option 3 as there are a number of land use compatibility concerns with respect to livestock and chickens in close proximity to residential uses. However, if council chooses to implement either option 1 or option 2, I go through the process involved in that. So an official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment would be required to permit this use within the residential zones, as well as an establishment of an animal control bylaw that sets out parameters regarding the keeping of hens. So both the official plan amendment and the zoning bylaw amendment are subject to a public planning process, which would include a public meeting before council makes a decision with respect to those amendments. In my report, I've outlined some parameters should council choose one of those options. That includes permitting coops as an accessory use on lots containing a single detached dwelling with a minimum lot area of 1 acre. Coops are to be in the rear yard only with a minimum side and rear yard setback of 3 meters, no larger than 10 square meters, and no taller than 3 meters. In terms of an animal control bylaw, permitting a maximum of 5 hens with a minimum age of 4 months, prohibiting roosters, on-site slaughtering, sale of eggs, manure, and other products, and then establishing detailed requirements for coop construction and maintenance, as well as requirements for the storage of feed. So again, if council chooses option 1 or 2, I'm looking for specific feedback on terms of parameters so that I can include those in the drafts presented at the public meeting, should that option be selected.
Thank you. Discussion. I'm sure we must have some discussion on this issue. Councillor Gilmore.
Thank you, Mayor. Sarah, just to spell out the timeline, before you do any of the work as far as the official plan amendment and those things, we would have a public meeting scheduled with this information, and then, like, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. I tend to agree that, or feel like option 1 is a good compromise based on all the information that you've included in the restrictions. I don't particularly see it to be a problem, but I think if we have the meeting, then we'll hear, and really it's the meeting is for the benefit of people that live in the hamlets, because the rest of us can already do all this stuff without any of these restrictions, if we so choose. So I prefer to, I don't have a problem with option 1. I think that's a good compromise for the people that want to do this. I don't see it being a big problem, number 1, but the public meeting is going to spell that out. So I guess my recommendation would be that we schedule the public meeting with the premise that we're going to proceed under the guidelines, regulations that you've listed specifically in option 1. And after that, then we'll decide whether we want to jump through all the rest of the hoops. That's my recommendation, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Gilmore. Sarah, sorry.
Sorry, if I may, Mr. Mayor. So in terms of the process, because it's tied to it would be a township-initiated planning application, I would need to have the draft wording for the official plan amendment, the draft wording for the zoning bylaw amendment, and a draft bylaw prepared in advance of the public meeting so that could be published. Residents could have a look at it, and then at the public meeting, council and myself would receive feedback based on those drafts. So modifications could be made based on some of the comments made at the public meeting, and I would then come back with a staff report that would outline, would summarize that feedback and how that was incorporated into the final drafts. And so it wouldn't be until that report is prepared that council would actually make a decision as to whether to amend the official plan or the zoning bylaw and adopt that bylaw. So I don't know if that clarifies the process a little bit, but again, tonight I'm looking if this is the option that you, council, would like to proceed with. Are the parameters in my report sufficient? Is there something else that you would like me to see included so that I can get started on those drafts to distribute when I issue notice of that public meeting?
Councillor Gilmore.
Thank you, Mayor, through you to Sarah. No, I think the parameters that you've included are excellent. Unfortunately, I guess we have to go through these other steps, and but I feel like we need to at least put that effort in to get us to the public meeting, and then we'll go from there once we receive the feedback at that time.
Councillor Van Vliet.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, being the only agricultural representative here, and slim pickings, I would have to go with option 3 because chickens are not clean. They carry so many diseases that it can transfer to your pets. Yes. It's on. Okay. So yes, they're full of diseases. You can't even go onto a chicken farm without getting all clearance. So, plus, as Councillor McCullen just said, if you have all these houses out at the lake and everybody's allowed to have 10 chickens side by side by side, that's a lot. That's a lot of waste. That's a lot of...
Yeah, it is though, shall be accessory use on lots containing single detached dwelling with a minimum lot size of 1 acre. So there are, many of them out on Lakeshore would not be able to comply. CAO, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and just for clarification with the planner, the option 1 is for hamlets. Option 2 would be for residential zones, which includes the lake. So the lake right now is not a hamlet, and those residential zones would not be permitted to have backyard hens if you went with the hamlet option, which is number 1.
Just to say, but Burnaby's a hamlet, and there's quite a lot of houses that are very close together there, and Winger, everywhere else. I'm just saying that I don't not like chickens, because we have chickens, but we're allowed to have them because we're aware of our surroundings. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, any other comments on this in regards to chickens in the hamlets? Councillor McCollum.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I tend to agree with Councillor Van Vliet. I know if you drive by chicken farms, there are gates up, there are signs that say there's a hazard, there's a disease, they want clean clothes on. I mean, there's a number of them up in West Lincoln you drive by. You can't even pull in the driveway, the gates across the end. I don't know, if we do this, are we endangering or potentially spreading disease to our chicken farmers that are here? I'm not an expert at this, but I just don't think it's right.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? Councillor Quillen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm inclined to support option 1. For people that had a hamlet put on them not that terribly long ago, they were always living rurally until the hamlet boundaries were put in. So I think basically there's longstanding residents that may think they had this option before, and it was pretty much government that stopped them from doing it. So I tend to agree with Councillor Gilmore, and we try to make this small step to keep it rural. So.
Okay, if there's no other discussion, would somebody like to make a motion? Councillor Gilmore.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I would move that we begin the process of endorsing option one. We'll get to the public meeting before we ratify anything, and we'll get the feedback, and then we'll make the decision. But if we decide that we don't want to do that, well, that's fine, but we're not going to get any feedback if we just ixnay the whole process. And I don't think that, first of all, I don't really think that it's going to be a big issue. I don't think a lot of people are going to even be bothered to take advantage of it. Some are already doing it. They're just going to bring them into compliance, which is a good thing. So I made too many comments in my motion, but anyway, I would move that we proceed with the preliminary steps to ratify option one.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Cridland. All in favor? Opposed? And that is defeated. Okay, I'm informed that we still have to come up with one of the options, so I need a motion for the option. Councillor Van Vliet, or so the motion is that the raising of hens should only occur in the areas designated and zoned as agricultural and rural in the Township of Wainfleet. A mover for that, please. Councillor McClellan, seconder. Councillor Van Vliet, all in favor? And opposed? And that is carried. Okay, we're going to move on now to our proposed 2020 International Volkswagen Festival, and I'll look to our operations manager to speak to that, please.
Your Worship, to members of council, I apologize for my voice. This is a report that's been was asked to be brought forward by council in regards to a presentation that was held on October 1st at a council meeting. Staff reviewed the request and actually had a meeting with the delegation and reviewed the options for the site itself. The original request was to be used for the soccer fields to be used for the event, and during the investigation or the meeting that we had, we felt that it was more prudent to use the baseball diamonds because it does have better drainage, and it would accommodate the facility a lot closer to the pavilion, so we can keep things a little bit more closer to where the center stage would be, which was be the pavilion. And in doing so, and speaking with the organizers, we did feel that to minimize some costing, or a donation that the council would then consider as part of the donation request in 2020. Staff wouldn't be required to be here. They would be looking after the event as far as parking facilities, security work, everything that would be done, garbage pickup. So staffing would be very minimal. We would be involved in setup, etc., pre-planning. But they would look after the event, so the costing would be minimal or smaller rather than having staffing. So the report in front of you, the report in front of you is requesting that in support of the event to move forward, and that the donation be part of the grants and donations allocation for 2020.
Thank you. Questions or discussion? Councillor Cridland.
Thank you, Mayor. And again, thank you for fitting this work in so quickly and getting back to us. I think there's two things here. So when I looked this over, and again, it's lots of information, it clarified to me that there is a grant request here for over $1,000. And my take on it is, we've been working for years around our grant process. So I think I just need it to be really clarified for me, because this is coming from staff, that the decision isn't that we're making a grant approval tonight out of our policy, that we're just saying, sure, send it into our grant process, our existing policy. So that's one clarification. And then, we could support the event separately. So we could say, of course you can do an event here because you might have to pay up to over $1,000 in grant, but we're not making a grant decision tonight outside of the policy. So I just need that clarified, and maybe I'll go back to staff because it is it is sort of in that recommendation. So thank you.
I'll look to the CAO to discuss that, please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I guess ultimately the answer to your question is it's up to council. What we've been able to identify through our processes is that the estimated, I guess, cost to the township of offering the lands and the facility to permit the event to go on is $1,000. As part of our normal process, I think staff are identifying that these are normally handled through the grant and donation process. And because we're talking about something happening in 2020, and we haven't yet started the 2020 grant deliberations per se, any monies that would be expended to offset this type of event in 2020 would need to be approved through that process. So the question becomes to council, if you'd like to support the event and make it go through, you can support the event now. The funding allocation for it would have to be part of that grant review process. And at that time, you'll then be faced with a decision. Does that $1,000 commitment, if you will, get made? Does that commitment sort of reduce the commitment that you have available to other funds, other community applications, or does that commitment sit on top of any sort of other commitments that you might have already had in 2019, for example? So for example, this year, if you had $25,000 worth of grants you gave out, come 2020, we would be flagging this dollar figure for 2020 and saying, you're either going to need an extra $1,000 to accommodate this plus everything else, or you leave everything as it is and you've only got $24,000 to distribute amongst where the 25 went this year.
Councillor Cridlin.
Thank you very much for that explanation. So the policy is for this to be a fair process. So I wouldn't see that as being fair to make that early decision on $1,000 before we haven't had a cap. We haven't seen what other programs might be coming from the community. The benefits appear to be leaving our community, but again, until you see them compared to everybody else. Just from a policy standpoint, I don't think I could be in support of making a decision to grant any amount tonight. So I'll just leave that out there and look for my other councillors to comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other discussion? The issue as was presented to us at last council was that the work on this needs to get started immediately if it hasn't already had some work done. And so for us to approve the event and then next year turn around and not approve the funding, it obviously doesn't work. So we'd have to look at this and say if we're in favor of this event coming to Wainfleet to be, to bring in tourist dollars for the restaurants, for the motel, for the different areas, then that is something that we would need to look at tonight to make that decision, because it would be completely unfair to the organizer to approve it tonight and all the work and effort goes into it, and then all of a sudden when it comes time, the $1,000 is not approved, and then that, obviously would cause some issues. So that's where we stand on that in that regard. And so really it comes down to whether we're prepared to put aside that $1,007 out of our grant money for next year, or add $1,007 to our grant money for next year, and make that decision tonight. Councillor Van Vliet.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm just wondering of the residents on Side Road 20, if we should have a public meeting and ask them, because that's going to be a lot for them, another weekend event in the summer that takes away from them. Because they already have Marshville, they have Canada Day, they have the fair, they have numerous weddings. And I'm just wondering if maybe we should talk to them. And I'm feeling like this is a little rushed.
Okay, yeah, your point is valid, but I just come back to the fact that I know they're looking at getting started. To have a public meeting would add, a month on to it, and I don't think that would be within their ability to move forward with the event, given another month delay. So, but it is a valid point for sure, and something for discussion. Any discussion on that? Anybody have had any thoughts? Councillor Gilmore?
Thank you, Mayor. Any feedback that I've read or heard has been positive towards this event. I'm inclined to support this and see where it goes in a year. I understand your concerns, but it is a public road like every other road, so people need to come and go and can do that. My question would be around the $1,007. Is that a hard cash number, or is that what you could term as foregone revenue?
To our operations manager for that one.
Through your worship, it's a foregone revenue. It's based on our fees and charges bylaw. If we were to rent it out, those facilities, that would be the income we would have gotten. I mean, we could go that weekend and not receive any revenue if it's not being used. But based on our fees and charges bylaw, that's what was assigned to those identified facilities.
Councillor McClellan?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. It's my understanding this is going to be an annual thing, is what they're trying to get going here with this Volkswagen Festival. Is that not the intent?
Well, I know in the presentation it painted quite the picture of Woodstock, all that sort of thing, and I think that was perhaps really reaching a little bit. I think probably that it would be a first year and have a look at it and see at the end of that first year.
Okay, so my point is, at budgets last year, we decided we were going to try and cut back on this. Gifts and cutting it. I've had a couple of calls about it. Personally, if it's going to be an annual thing for this year, if we give them a break, that's fine. But any other time, you pay full pop, and so if it comes back next year, you pay the bill. There's no charity, right? So they're trying to get it off. It's for a worthy cause, I understand, but our whole thing was nobody's told me to give away more of their tax dollars. They asked that we keep it in the town, right? So.
Thank you. Councillor Cridlin?
Thank you for those comments, because you do remind me that there's nothing here that's really staying in the town. So, sorry, through you, Mayor. So, the event, if we're going to be talking about the event, that's one thing, but I'm talking about the policy. So, we're stepping out here for something urgent. Great, it's not a precedent. No issue with the event. It's not about the event. Under very short timelines, thank you again for staff. Maybe the compromise is that there's nothing foregone at all this time with all the work that's been done, and seeing what the number is, I can support that we will offer our premises and we will offer our assets to a group that hasn't been here before. They have added the extra in the report where there are local volunteers that are going to be used, which helps the package if we were going to get into looking at this under the policy. But I would not see at all giving them a break this year. I might actually see that next year when it's in the context of everybody's in the community's matrix and having to wait and go through the process. So if we're breaking the process, I'm going to ask for a recorded vote. Maybe, again, the compromise is they can see the amount. It actually isn't a lot amount. Maybe if they've got this grand event planned, they'll see that they can recoup from all the events and the proceeds, et cetera. The other thing is the proceeds are going somewhere where, again, it's out of, if we're going to look at the event, it's out of the township. So if we're going to start talking about the event, it really breaks down, but we would normally do that at budget time. So I think we've really compromised our policy, and I will ask for a recorded vote when we call this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cridlin. So any other comments before I throw my 2 cents in? Okay. I'm in favor of this event. $1,007 to me is not a huge give by the township. The economic benefit that could come into the township could be, gas, meals, motels, hotels, all that sort of thing. I think that it would be beneficial. And I hate to close the door on something that without even trying it in one sense, because who knows, it could be a great event and it could be every couple of years or every year, who knows, and it may not even pan out that much. It may just be okay. I'd like to give something like that a shot, have a look at it and give it a chance. And to me, my opinion would be that we basically consider that next year we'll take that $1,007 off the grant money or add an extra $1,007 onto our policy next year and go from there. But to turn down something like this without trying it once, to me, would be unfortunate. So that's my 2 cents. Councillor Van Vliet.
Mr. Mayor, I agree with Councillor Quinlan on this because we'd be breaking policy, and we've been, that's what we have, our force has been, that we want to stick to policies. We make them, we should stick to them. And it has nothing to do with the event. I personally used to own a Volkswagen Golf. I have nothing against them. It's just, we have policies and procedures for a reason, and we don't break them for our own residents.
Okay, any other comments on that? To me, it's not breaking the policy. We're just simply looking ahead and saying that, it's retroactively we're approving that this event, and so that we know we have to basically designate X amount of money out of our next grant policy, and we would ask them to submit the grant policy, but we basically would know that we're obligated to that. That's kind of how I'm looking at it. I too am not in favor of breaking policy in that sense. But this is one of those ones where the horse is before the cart's before the horse. Let's get that right. And we have to kind of make the decision whether we're going to move ahead with it, and then we're basically obligated for that next year. So it's within our policy. It's just how we're doing it. It's just a little backwards. That's all because of this event. If this event went forward and was successful and the community liked it, because there's a community component there as well, then in future years we would, refine it much more in regards to how it works, and it would work well. But that's my thoughts. I think it's important to give it a try. So it's my opinion. Councillor Cridlin.
Through you, Mayor, I guess my opposition's pretty much obvious now. So when you're saying that we're either going to add it to a cap we don't have or subtract it from a cap we don't have, I'd like to be clear then the decision I'm making tonight, which way that we are going to go on that, or are we going to make up our minds on that point then during the budget discussion? So I'd like to know if we're taking it away from existing Wainfleet resident grants, or we're going to go above a cap that we agree on at some future date. I'm not interested in taking it away from any other Wainfleet residents. Thank you.
Any other discussion? So we did, Councillor McClellan.
The one point is, it is for wounded warriors. I don't know if we have any wounded vets here that are in trouble. It may well be supporting people in town. I personally don't know any, but I don't know everybody in town, and there probably is 2 or 3 or more that are in town that may benefit from this.
Thank you. That's a comment that we hadn't brought up in our discussions. So, and I'm in agreement with Councillor Cridlin and Councillor Van Vliet that yes, we have our $25,000, I believe it's $25,000 policy as a cap on grants, and yes, we shall not go past that. We set that in policy in the last budget. So basically what we're saying is that we are pre-authorizing, by approving this, we're basically pre-authorizing that 1,007 to come out of next year's grant money is basically what we're saying, and that we would be committed to that. So is there any other discussion? Shall we call the question? Okay, so that the motion recommendation from staff is that the report be received, and that council directs staff to include the International Volkswagen Festival to raise funds for Wounded Warriors Canada event in the grant and donation allocation for 2020 grant approvals during budget deliberations, and that this event be approved. A mover for that, please. Councillor McClellan, seconder. Councillor Gilmore. And you wanted a recorded vote, Councillor Cridlin, so, okay.
Councillor Cridland. Councillor Gilmore.
In favor.
Councillor McClellan.
In favor.
Councillor Van Vliet. Opposed. Ooh. Mayor Gibson.
In favor. Okay, so that is carried. Okay, we're going to move on to the Parquet project, 41949 Feeder Road. I look to our operations manager to speak to that as well as he can.
Thank you, Your Worship, to through your two members of council. Staff managed to obtain some funds through the Ontario Main Street Revitalization Fund, and we included as part of the budget proposal that we presented to council this year. One of the proposals that we had allocated 20,000 of that money that we received towards the Parquet or the vacant property across the road from council chambers, just to try and revitalize that piece of property. There was some concerns raised about what we were proposing, so staff did some other research and reviewed some other options for it. Staff included in this report proposed a 10-foot gazebo, wooden gazebo, just to keep the cost down, but we did research alternative structures to put on it. But basically, attached in the appendices is the location as well as a design concept for that piece of property. It's mostly going to be hardscape. It's going to be mostly just a parquet with some benches, a small gazebo, planting some trees just for an atmosphere. Just to revitalize that piece of property and give somewhere to to sit back and enjoy. Attached to the report is the few concept drawings as far as some of the structures that are available. But I look for council's direction moving forward for that.
Thank you. Discussion? Councillor McClellan.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Nan. Richard, the appendix, the wooden one is about a 10-foot structure, and the metal one that I believe is probably the right one looks like it's probably 25 or 30 feet. Can we not get that in a 10-foot model?
Through your worship to Councillor McClellan. The steel structure itself, when I started researching it, the smallest it came in was 16. Mm-hmm. But that's a design of a 16-footer. But they didn't actually send me copies of anything smaller than a 16-footer. So I don't know if they don't design anything smaller, but the company itself only had the 16-footer.
Thank you.
Any other questions? And just to note as well for the public, the $20,000 designated from this is from the Ontario Main Street Revitalization Fund. It's provincial money specifically for this sort of thing. It's not our Wainfleet tax dollars at all. And in fact, that $20,000 must be used for a project like this or we lose it. So just so for the taxpayer understands, we're not tapping into Wainfleet tax dollars at all here. It's just a $20,000 grant to revitalize downtowns. We received that grant, and this is what we've decided to do with it, and it's good use for it. So, any other questions or discussion? Councillor Van Vliet.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Richard. Sorry, I have to make you talk. What's the lifespan of the wooden gazebo as opposed to the vinyl one?
Through your worship, vinyl it's just a coating on top of, it's a wood structure, it just with vinyl cladding over top of it. The issue with vinyl cladding is it does get dirty, so there is going to be some additional maintenance costs, where if it's a cedar structure or pressure treated structure, you can just let it cure on its own with some a lot less maintenance. You can stain it, you can start doing that process, but it's similar to a deck. Once you start staining things, you know you're going to be doing it every year. So the intention is to try and prolong it and do as much cleaning as we can, but keeping the initial cost down. Again, because the revitalization program only gave us the $40,000, we're allocating 10 now towards wayfinding signage to enhance some of our locations or promote some of our locations around town. And just to keep costs down, that's the reason why we decided to go with that structure. I mean, if I had $100,000, I'd gladly put up a larger structure, etc. But this was to revitalize that site.
I have one more question. So if we went with the wood one, would that be in-house building, or are we contracting it out?
Through your worship, that is actually a structure that is built and delivered intact the way it is. It comes on a trailer, you just pour the foundation for it, and you put it on, you anchor it, and that's where it is.
Councillor McClellan.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Nan, and again, I hate to keep you talking here, but the last structure on your appendix, there is no price on that. Is there a reason why, or is it just missed?
Sorry, through your worship to Councillor McClellan, it was actually $31,000 for that steel structure. For some reason, I don't know why, but like I was working with a local contractor as well, and he quoted me the same price. He says, because to be perfectly honest, they knew it's for a municipality, and that's what happens.
Okay, any other discussion on that? Okay, seeing none, the recommendation that this report be received and that council approve the parquet design with the installation of sidewalks, a wooden octagon gazebo, improve the parking facility, and purchase a seating device to be installed inside the gazebo. Mover for that, please. Councillor Van Vliet, seconder. Councillor Cridlin, all in favor, and that is carried. Okay, we just move into review of correspondence, and I know the clerk wishes to speak to this.
I just wanted to note that at the last regular meeting, Council adopted a revised Council correspondence policy. So Council, any correspondence addressed to the Mayor and Council is now circulated to Council in a weekly information package. And for the purposes of transparency, a link to the CIP is posted to the Township's website for public access and review. And if you look at the screen, it shows exactly where to go. So the Government tab and Council correspondence for anybody interested.
Okay, so we'll look to the Conservation Authority mail item 231 received from the Conservation Authority, and I think Councillor Cridlin wishes to speak to that, please.
Again, thank you, Mayor. Again, this is a new report coming out of the NPCA board, and it's a formal update of board's decisions from the previous previous meeting. So again, that's going to be in that new package that we've got there, but it's something, you know, maybe I'll put it on when I see it here for the next little bit, but it will always be available and be transparent ongoing. So thanks for that.
Thank you. And anything further on that? Okay, thank you. Okay, and we'll, item number 234, Memorandum of Understanding regarding procurement of goods and services with other municipalities. And I think our CAO will speak to that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Very briefly, the municipalities of Welland, Pelham, Port Colborne, Wainfleet, and there's one other one, I'm sorry, Thorold, I'm sorry, thank you, have banded together and developed a memorandum of understanding that we would like to pursue regarding joint purchasing and joint services. All municipalities within the region currently already belong to a joint purchasing association region-wide, and that organization serves to undertake various procurements throughout the course of the year to obtain best pricing for things such as materials and supplies, you know, paper, pens, all that sort of thing. Other types of supplies, including fuel, sand and salt, whatever the municipality needs to keep going. In order to strengthen that sort of relationship that exists amongst Niagara municipalities and expand it to include things beyond the normal procurements, to include things such as goods and services, perhaps things such as paving contracts, large purchases which oftentimes we can't coordinate through the purchasing group, such as vehicles, heavy equipment. The municipalities have sought out each other and have decided to enter into this memorandum where we would work much more aggressively to attempting to finding savings and attempting to implement the best practices with respect to acquisitions and purchasing. As well as services. I mentioned some of the big things like paving, but the other thing that we as CEOs have been talking about is other services internal to the organization, which oftentimes aren't available externally. For example, building inspection services or support for finance departments that might need some assistance from time to time in your municipality. So those are all things that we are going to be exploring and looking at above and beyond the sort of steps that have already been taken historically to make these types of arrangements. So what has happened is there's been a basic signing, if you will, by the mayor, and the signing of the MOU is conditional upon the ratification of all the councils. So this matter is being brought to all the councils for their consideration and review, and whether or not they would be willing to join in to officially become part of this. I attended a CAO's meeting earlier this week, and we've already had some interest expressed by other municipalities that weren't part of the initial sign-up that they would also like to participate. So it is a very positive move forward, if you will, and demonstration of the commitment of the municipalities to trying to improve things for their constituents.
Any questions? Councillor Van Vliet.
I'm just curious, and so are other people, how these five?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Originally, actually, the Welland and Thorold executed a very similar agreement a number of years ago. And moving forward from those two, sort of the southern tier of Niagara region, we all share common borders with each other. We are all in very close proximity to each other, and it was a natural starting point for us as part of our sort of investigation of who does what and how we do things, that this group be sort of like the initial core. And again, the intent is that it become available to any and all comers, and we expect that it has the potential to move beyond the initial group very quickly.
And just to add to that, we've established a pretty good working relationship with these other municipalities, and I fully expect that in not too far down the road here, all the other municipalities will jump in and join, and it's going to be all of us here at one point. So I guess we need a motion to ratify this, or a motion to approve it, please. Somebody wish to make a motion? We have to approve this. Councillor McClellan?
I'll make a motion to approve it.
And the seconder, Councillor Van Vliet. All in favor? And that is approved. Okay. Okay, moving on to the last couple of items here. And we've already done our closed session, so we'll be done here very soon. The Township of Wainfleet bylaw, that bylaw number 071-2019, being a bylaw to repeal and replace bylaw number 43-2018, being a bylaw to establish and regulate the Township of Wainfleet Fire and Emergency Services, be read and passed this 22nd day of October 2019. Any discussion? A mover on that, please. Councillor Gilmore, seconder. Councillor McClellan, all in favor? And that is carried. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, just with the passing of that bylaw, again, I would reiterate something that we've said at the first meeting in October, that the new level of service that you've just formally adopted does include internal firefighting for our fire department, being able to respond into buildings if and when needed. So congratulations to council and to the fire department.
Okay, and the bylaw that sorry, getting ahead of myself here. Are there any notices of motion this evening? Okay, seeing none, we've had our closed meeting, and we've already did the rise and report. And so now we move on to the bylaw to adopt, ratify, and confirm the actions of the council at its regular meeting held the 22nd day of October 2019. Be read and passed this 22nd day of October 2019. Have a mover for that, please. Councillor Gilmore, seconder. Councillor Cridlin, all in favor? That is carried. And if there is no other business, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.